This is Caroline from Caroline's Adventure. We all face challenges in our lives. How do some people take those challenges and turn them into powerful results? Join me as we dig into a story on resilience, hope, and joy, and uncover lessons we can each use in our own lives. But before we start, please take a moment to show that 5-star rating button some love, and follow while you're there to be updated every time I release a new episode. Now, before we begin, a word of caution. On this podcast, we regularly discuss topics like sexual assault, suicide, and addiction, which may be disturbing to some. Please take care as you listen. And if you need support in the United States, reach out to the crisis text line at 741-741. Today we're talking with Lathan Bass of Bass Built Fitness. When I was out on my For You page, and I saw Lathan pop up, and I could tell right away that it wasn't just your typical fitness page, because you talk not only about the, get in there and get the workout in and what's an amazing workout, but you also talk about the mental and the emotional part of it. And I think that is probably, for a lot of us, one of the biggest challenges, and that a lot of people don't talk about. A lot of people talk about the, you got to man up and get in there and get that lift. But sometimes the mental piece is the hardest part in the process. So what got you to that place? What got you to a place where you took control over that, but also started sharing that with others?
Yeah, so I think, taking it back, way far, I was always a big kid, like always the big kid. Like when I was in first grade, I weighed 100 pounds. Like I was a big kid throughout middle school. I was a big kid in high school. And then in high school, I went on my first diet and I ended up losing about 35 pounds. And it was when I really realized that I kind of had control over, how I felt, how I looked, like I could change these things about myself. And it was a really empowering feeling. And I just remember that like something just kind of clicking then like in my mind where I was like, wow, this fitness thing, it can do so much for you. And so as I kind of got older, I was really into sports, ended up playing football where I gained a bunch of weight. And it was part of the deal, I was a lineman, so I had to be a big guy and got up to 300 pounds. So I was a big kid, my whole life, adult life, childhood life, I was 300 pounds. Get done with that and I decide I'm ready to lose this weight. Like I want to feel better. I want to look better. I want to have more confidence. Like I'd always kind of had this notion, ever since I lost that original weight that I wanted to just be fit and be healthy and feel good. And so I start losing this weight and I go through this process of losing about 75 pounds. I get there, I'm feeling really good about myself. Like I look completely different, feel completely different, but then I kind of start like going backwards a little bit. I start gaining a little bit of weight because while I was losing this weight, I did it in a way that probably wasn't the best. As you said, we kind of get in that mode of like just get in the gym, like pound through it. I was working out 6, 7 days a week. I was kind of restricting my food. I was just not doing things that were really sustainable. And that's when I kind of had to take a step back as I started gaining this weight. I had to take a step back and just think, okay, like there's a little bit more to this than just getting in there and eating right and working out. Like there's a whole different part of this. There's a whole different mindset piece. And that's when I really got into it about, just figuring out, okay, this has got to be a new lifestyle. And so one of the things that I talk about a lot is changing your identity when it comes to, whether it's weight loss, whether it's, you wanting to just be more confident, like whatever the case may be, you have to take on this new identity because you're always going to revert back to how you see yourself. You're always going to live in alignment with that. So for me, as somebody who was just always a big kid, like always overweight, I was the chubby kid, I was the fat kid, like I was the kid who just like that was me. Like people treat you that way and you see yourself that way. And so I had to start to cultivate this new identity about who I wanted to be. And once I did that, everything sort of started to click. Like I started thinking about, okay, what do, healthy people do? Well, they work out regularly, but they don't overdo it because we all know you can overdo it, right? So I started doing these things that were, more sustainable when I started thinking about myself in a different way. And when I started having these conversations with people about, they ask me questions because they see me back then and then they see me now and they're like, okay, how'd you do it? And that's a big piece of it. I always tell them like, the biggest thing is like you have to change your identity. It's got to be a lot of mindset to come with it. Otherwise, you're never going to be able to sustain those results and you're never going to be happy either. Like you have to find that balance and that mental piece of it is just a huge part of it. So I guess that's why I try to talk about that so much because I feel like it's a more difficult, complex topic to talk about. Um, I mean, the sets and reps and how often to work out and what to eat, like that stuff's easy. That stuff's simple. But like people miss this other stuff because it's a little bit harder to start to work on, changing your identity. And then you kind of have to dig a little deeper and be like, okay, what are these beliefs that I have about myself that maybe I have been ignoring, that have been causing me to not be able to lose this weight or get fit or even think that I deserve to, be healthy and feel good and those sorts of things. So I try to dig into that a little bit. And I think sometimes it might surprise people because, they see me and they see, the muscles and like I have this appearance and like, I do like to get in there and get after it and that sort of thing. But I also think the mindset part is just as important, if not more important, because without it, you're always going to struggle. So I guess that's a long way of answering that
No,
question. But
I
yeah,
love that.
that's why I talk about that so much.
Well, and that is huge because we do have such a powerful component here that we often overlook. When I had my accident, I put on a lot of weight. I was doing lots of medications and lots of not moving. And so I don't even remember how much I put on after my accident, but I put on a lot of weight. And going through the process of losing it was really, really hard. They put me on for a while steroids to help with some of the inflammation, and that stuff can just wreak havoc on your system.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I can remember talking to a nutritionist, she said, my clients, time and time again, I can give them the plan. I can give them the outline. I can say, okay, you're going to eat this, this, and this. But until we tackle the mental piece, they will never find long-term sustainable success. And so we went through some of that process for me, and it was crazy because one of the things that I realized about myself growing up in a household where food was inconsistent, and so when it came in, you ate. And I mean, it was one of those things where like you made hay when the sun shone because you never knew. We went hungry and I went through periods where like we had nothing to eat for days on end but oatmeal. And so like when there was good food, you threw down. And I had unconsciously been harboring that same mentality. And so when I would go on a diet or when I would go on any kind of restriction, it would make me so angry. And I would get furious. And it was one of those things where it was like I was so resistant to it. And I never really thought about why. I was like, oh, everybody hates dieting. That's just the deal.
Hmm.
And so when I started talking with her and I realized that what it was triggering in me wasn't the fact that I hated the dieting or that I hated shifting what I ate. It was the fact that in my mind, I still had this tape playing of why in the world would I willingly cut off food when food is a scarce commodity?
Hmm.
When I could potentially not have food tomorrow, it's stupid not to take advantage of food when it's available. And it was such a eye-opening moment. And as you said, it finally made me realize that I have some control here. And I still fall back into those same cycles. And I'm sure that like you said, you did that balls to the wall approach and then you shifted it back a little bit and it was like, oh, wait a second. I need something sustainable.
Hmm.
But with your clients, do you see that finding that sustainability is different for each of them? And then once they find that magic combination for them, it has huge results.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such a big part of it because, as you said, like we all know specifically whether it's weight loss, but weight loss is an easy example because it's like,
Yeah.
okay, move more, eat less. Like, but that is so not helpful. And I hate when people just throw that out there where they're like, you need to be more tough, you need to be more disciplined. It's like, yes, we all know this, like, we all know that. But like, what are these blocks that we have that are causing us to not be able to stick to these things? And there's a time and a place where you just need to buckle down. But a lot of times I find there's just these unconscious patterns that we don't even realize that are holding us back, or these beliefs that we have based on our childhood or things that happened a long time ago that we're not even realizing. So I think being able to have somebody who's kind of been in those shoes and then somebody who's actually willing to work with you versus just be like, you need to work harder, you need to do this, you need to do this. It's like, that's not helpful. So like, I want somebody who's going to walk alongside me and help me kind of uncover those things, which is what I try to do. And I find that when we're able to kind of have those breakthroughs, that's when clients do see the biggest success. Because, I always tell people too, it's like, yes, I want to get you physical results. Like I want you to lose the weight or get stronger or build muscle or do all these things. Like that's great. But for me, when I look for the biggest wins, I look for those mental shifts. Like when I hear them talking a different language or talking in a more confident way, or like having these realizations about, okay, I was doing this and like now I actually understand why and I'm going to do this instead. Like those are the big wins for me because I know that once I start hearing that type of stuff, I'm like, oh, they're set for life. Like I don't care if we get results in 3 months or, get you results in 30 days. I care if down the line in 2, 3 years, like you're in a great place and now you can live the life you want to live and you can play with your kids and you're setting a good example for them and you're having this positive impact on your own life, but then also those around you. So that mental piece is just such a huge part of it.
It resonates in so many different parts of life. It's easy to look at your life compared to someone else's and be like, oh, they're just set out better than I am. They've had more opportunities than I have. They've got better genetics, or they're smarter, or they're this, or they're that, or whatever. The truth is that we are all infinitely capable of anything we set our mind to. I mean, you and I were talking before the interview started. I was the dirty kid. I was the poor kid that had a horrible grammar and wore clothes that didn't fit, and I was dirty most of the time. I had to change my entire mentality around who I am in order to become successful. And this is the trickiest piece to train. Once you train it, and once you shift your thinking in general, it's crazy what we can accomplish. But it takes a lot of dismantling whatever the misconceptions that you have about yourself and replacing it with healthier ones, or ones that are more aligned with where you want to go. And it's tricky. It's I In these interviews, I'm always amazed at how that mental shift is the big piece that makes such a difference in people's lives. Did you have a big moment, or has it been a series of smaller shifts that have gotten you there?
I think originally for sure it was more of a smaller shift type of thing. Like, I mean, as we were talking about before, I know you said like you come from a very, interesting story and you had a lot of things going on. Like I have that background myself coming from single parent household, not a lot of money myself. I grew up in a pretty much predominantly white area, which like it's pretty, I mean, I had a great childhood experience, but that also brings along some challenges as well. Just, being the only one and, it was like me and my brother, so it was like, it was a little bit different, being in that kind of, environment. So like just different things like that growing up. And then I think from a young age, I started to realize, okay, like you can either use these things for you or you can use these things to play the victim. And I think when you make that perspective shift and just realize that, okay, I do have actually the power here to like decide what I'm going to do with these opportunities, that makes a huge difference. And then kind of just, going throughout things and growing up, you go through things in high school and college. And then I had a big one in college when I played football. And my senior season, I ended up tearing my ACL, my MCL, my PCL, my meniscus. So my my right knee was just a limp noodle. And being an athlete my entire life, that was a huge part of my identity, like a huge part. So like nobody really ever prepares you for like when that part of you just is gone, like when that part just dies. Like so, it happened just abruptly. Like they told me on the sideline, okay, like your career is over, and I'm like crushed, like uncontrollable tears, just crying, breaking down on the sideline, and just like realizing, okay, like what is this new normal going to be like? So I think when you go through different things like that, it just forces you to really look at who you are and who you want to be. And then you start to make those shifts and you start to, you again see kind of the silver lining and, okay, how is this going to help me? How is this going to shape me? And then a big part of that too, I feel like, is like, I started looking at it as, I've always been a coach. I taught for a while. I was a high school teacher. So a big part of it for me, where I found a lot of just help, I guess, and a lot of value in those situations was like, okay, how is this going to help other people? Because like you can go through something and like some things just plain suck. Like, you try to find the lesson in things, but like some things just absolutely suck. Like there's no way around it. But then I started thinking about, okay, how is this going to help, down the line? So like with the knee thing, like, okay, when I have an athlete who goes through this, how can I relate to him? How can I help him with the weight loss thing? That's why I share so much personal stuff
Yeah.
like online for 20,000 people to hear or whatever, like about myself that maybe I would never ever would have shared, try to be vulnerable, because how is this going to, relate to somebody? How is this going to connect? And you never know like what those things are going to do for people. And I'm sure you have those experiences too with the things that you share. And I'm sure you get messages where you're like, wow, I didn't think that me sharing this little thing was going to help so many people. So I guess that's one way that I try to look at it.
That is so true. And it is hard. I had a lot, I still have sometimes a lot of shame over things that aren't mine to carry. But It's hard to remember that sometimes. And the gift that you're giving people is that by standing in your truth and making yourself vulnerable, it lets people see themselves in your struggle, but it also lets them see, you know what, that's not the end of this. This is a part of the process, and this guy can get through it. So I can get through it. And it's a gift that you're giving people because it is hard. It's always hard to stand in your truth and put it out there and to be open and vulnerable and honest. But that's what really, as you said, that's what really, really helps people. And it's what really moves people forward. It's easy to look at Arnold Schwarzenegger, who has made an entire lifetime and is a star and a politician, and no one sees the B-roll of Arnold's life. You know,
Mhm.
no one sees the tough moments, the struggles. Like, we all think of him as Mr. Olympia. Everybody thinks of him from the standpoint of success. We see these people who reach these huge pinnacles, and we don't typically see the struggles that they've overcome in the process. And the thing that I have learned is that the more successful you are, the bigger the struggles are that you've overcome. No one does a straight point A to point B success path. It just doesn't look like that. It is a little success and then a failure, and then another success and then a failure, and then another success and then a failure. And it's that cumulative building that gets us there. So your willingness to share that process and let people see it is such a gift. And you are making a much bigger impact than you'll probably ever realize.
It is wild like now just having more people like because you get those messages from like people that people around the world that you don't even know. Like you have no idea who these people are. Like you've never met them and they've been following you and they hear your story and they hear this post and they hear this thing that you went through and they connect with it and they send you a message like, man, I really needed to hear that. Or man, I've really been struggling and like that's helped me so much. And it's just wild to think about that you can have that type of reach. So something, I mean, just, social media gets a lot of bad rap for a lot of things, but it can do a ton of good for a lot of people. And I think it is hard to, be vulnerable and share those things at times. And I know for people like who know me, like from, years ago, they'd be like, you sharing all this stuff, like you're normally the quiet guy, like, kind of kept to yourself. But then like, as I started going through this process and like just having more conversations with people, I was like, this changed my life so much with just like, getting into fitness and like making the transformation and everything. And then I realized how many other people were just struggling with the same exact thing. I was like, I feel like it's my duty to share this. Like I want everybody to feel like I feel now because the way that I feel now is 100 times better. Like it's been the most impactful thing that I've ever done in my entire life. So like I want to help as many people as possible get to that. So and I feel like fitness and health is such a big foundation of that, whether it's you want to be a better mom or a better dad, or you want to be better at your job, or you want to be a better husband or wife or whatever the case may be, like whatever you want to do, that fitness and health has to be a foundation of that in order to live that life you want to live. And so I feel like that's my duty to help as many people as possible to get to that place.
That's awesome. So, what is your next step?
It's something that I think about daily. Ever since I was really young, growing up in a, like I said, single parent household, like I had a lot of people that like poured into me that didn't have to. Like they didn't have to take their time out to, take on this kid and, teach him lessons. And, I had, like I said, I grew up in a small town and I had so many just families and close friends that would just basically take care of me. Like my mom was working a lot, single mom. So like they would take me on vacations. They would take me out to eat with them. Like they would give me all these experiences. And so I always had father figures growing up, like people who didn't have to do that, but I learned so much from them, coaches and teachers and just my friends' dads and things like that who just poured into me. So from a young age, I always felt this obligation, like I need to give this back, which is why I was like so drawn to coaching and teaching and those sorts of things. So now as I kind of started to transition and I left the teaching profession to do more of this fitness thing, I was like, I have this message and I want to share this with people. So again, they can live the best life that they can. And so, I mean, with the, social media thing, I try to just put out a ton of content to just relate to people. And then I also do, some one-on-one coaching because as we said, a lot of the work is done, with the mindset stuff. And that's a little bit deeper work and things that you have to work on a little bit, takes a little bit more time and you have to be a little bit, build that relationship and gain trust and all those sorts of things. But I feel like there's so many opportunities and ways that you can take it. But I guess right now I'm just kind of taking it a day at a time and just trying to help people as they come along and they ask for help and just help in any way that I can.
That's awesome. And it's interesting. You just touched upon one of the most common things that I've noticed. And I don't know that I'd ever realized the impact that having a community supporting you has. In these interviews, I've talked with people who've come out of prison and been able to come back and settle into the community and become a force of good. I've talked with people who've come through the foster care system. I've talked with so many people who've had huge transitions in their lives and have now turned to give back. And it all comes down to having that community behind you and having that support. And it's interesting because I don't think that I realized what a critical component of the equation that was. Having people, and because it isn't always family. In fact, it oddly enough rarely is the actual blood family. It's usually having some larger community behind you. That's what enables people to create their own path forward. And it's interesting to hear you talk about it as well. It is such a hugely powerful component that if you can find a way to dig into, makes a huge difference in life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, one of the things that surprised me too is like I'm a big, like I love to learn. I'm a big guy. Like I love education. Like I love to learn. I love to read. I love to podcast. Like that's my jam. I love that kind of stuff. And so I listen to health and fitness podcasts all the time. And I listened to one a couple years back and they were talking about, the most influential factors on health. And they said, it wasn't diet, wasn't exercise, wasn't sleep, it was actually relationships. And it was like you start thinking about that and you're like, okay, well, yeah, that makes sense. We're humans, we're communal beings. But on top of that, the relationships that are around you are going to impact your sleep. They're going to impact your diet. They're going to impact everything. So you start to realize just how important relationships are, and that community aspect is as well. Being an athlete, like you said, it's not necessarily just your direct bloodline. Like it's those people that like you want to be around, like those teammates as you're growing up, like those are your brothers, those are your sisters that you go to battle with and you go through all these hard things with. And having that community, I think, is such a big aspect that a lot of people sometimes overlook. And I think, just knowing that you have that support, but also feeling like you're doing it for other people outside yourself. Like I think, doing things for yourself is good. And I think that is important. But I think a lot of people really feel that extra pull, that extra motivation when they are doing it for other people around them as well, because it's not just about you. Now it's like, okay, it's about my kids, or it's about these people that are counting on me, or, it's about these other people over here, my friends that want to see me succeed. I think when you have that extra motivation, it goes a long way into getting you through some of that hard stuff, or, making those changes that you really want to make. So,
Absolutely. It's interesting. I don't know if you've read or watched any of the documentaries about the blue zones. There
hmm,
are
yeah.
places in the world, they're called blue zones, and it's the areas where people tend to live longer, happier lives. And sometimes it's an extra decade or two. It's a significant difference. Um, and they've tied it to several things. I'm vegan, so one of the things that really resonates with me is a predominantly whole foods but heavily vegetable oriented diet plays a huge role. Having a job of some kind is another one where you stay essentially gainfully engaged, not so much employed, but engaged in some kind of activity that enables you to get back every day is the second one. Regular exercise, and it isn't, getting out there and throwing the weights away. It's whatever it is that keeps your body moving every day. So it's a regular walk if you're in Sardinia, Italy. It's but the one of the really big ones is having a community that you're part of and that you give back to and that gives to you. And I don't know that until I started doing these podcasts and until I started talking with people, I don't think I had ever really given that the amount of focus that it deserves. Growing up, I learned very early on that the only one that I could rely on was myself. And that if I wanted something different in life, I had to make it happen myself. But what I'm realizing is that community piece plays a much bigger role. And I know in my own life, like I've got a lot of friends, but I don't have a lot of really close. And part of that's a me issue where I have a real challenge with relying on people to do things. I know that if I commit to it, I will make it happen. But relying on people to help me get there is not a comfort zone for me, but I'm realizing it needs to be because it plays such a critical role in enabling us to be our best selves. And you're so right that social media can play a huge role in that. Um, I never would have thought that sharing my story would have an impact on people. I feel like most days I'm a hot mess and I'm doing my best just to get from point A to point B. But it's crazy how many of us are in that same path of just trying to keep the wheels on the wagon. And the more that we share with one another, the more we can learn from one another and the more that we can lift one another up. And so you're absolutely right that it's about finding whatever your community is and being a part of that and letting that be a part of your journey as well as giving back to that. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, just, thinking about it, like we understand that, we need other people, but at the same time, it's like, because I get it too, because I'm that guy who's like, I can do it myself. Like, I don't need your help. Like, I want to rely on me, struggle to rely on others. But then I started noticing, as you start asking people for help, it's not just for you, it's also for them too. Because the people around you that really love you, they want to help you. Like, they want to be there for you. And then on top of that, it's like, okay, let's take this long term where we accomplish all these things and we do all these things. Well, like, who are we going to celebrate with if we don't have those
Yeah,
people?
that
All
is
those
so
great
true.
things in life, like if you don't have those people to celebrate with it, like it's all for naught, right? Like we want to make sure that we have that community around us. So like as we do start to accomplish these things, like we feel great about it because like through social media, I've started to notice like when people will reach out, they're like, I'm going through this weight loss journey. I don't have anybody to talk to about this. Or like I feel like, you're living in my head and I don't even know you because like I can relate to what you're saying, but I don't have anybody who I can talk to about this. So like just having those people out there who you can connect with and who you can just relate to a little bit, I think goes a really, really long way with people.
I love that. Yeah. And you're right. Your community doesn't have to be the people that are physically in your space. One of the things that one of my early podcast episodes, I talked with a woman and she was really struggling with the fact that as she got more and more successful, the people that were in her immediate environment, her family and her close friends, she lost several friends in the process. And she said, it was so hard for her to realize that the ones that we expect sometimes to be there and be part of that group celebrating with us are the ones that benefit from us staying in our old habits. And sometimes you have to get out and make new connections in order to have someone who's there with you through the next step. And it's hard. That is a hard process to go through. When I had my accident, I lost my two of my closest friends because I made a ton of changes in my life. Essentially took me off at the ankles. And I was completely knocked on my butt. And I had to start from ground one and accept the fact, and one of the toughest things I had to accept was the fact that I would never be able to get back to who I was before the accident. Because for a while there, that was my goal. It was like, okay, when am I going to get back to who I was? When am I going to get back to who I was physically, emotionally, mentally, all of that? And I had to accept that not only could I never go back to that person, but the person that I had been wasn't serving me. It wasn't the best version of me. I had created this entire world around hiding the components of my previous life. And I had this whole narrative around who I was that took a lot of energy to maintain, but wasn't really who I was. And I had to shed that and find comfort in this new version of me and figure it out this new version of me. But I'm so grateful for going through this path because this new life that I've built since my accident has been so much better. And it's enabled me to help so many others and be helped by so many others. And so it's not the path I would have chosen, but I'm so grateful for the fact that it happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we like I can tell obviously you're very growth oriented, very growth minded, as am I. Like that's one of my biggest values. And I think, you have to like you say you want these things, you say you want these, change and you want to lose the weight or get fit or, get this new job or make money. And it's like you have to realize, like you said, that you're going to have to become a different person. And that's
Yes.
hard sometimes. Like you might have to give some people up. You might have to make some new friends, hang around new people. You might have to change your environment. Like and those things are not easy because as humans, we like comfortability. We like the things that are similar, whether or not they're serving us or not. We don't really care because we get used to them, and we're like, even, you see this all the time, like with relationships or like, things like that, where people stay in these terrible relationships because they're comfortable, right? Like we like the familiarity of it, and just understanding like, okay, I'm gonna have to get a little bit uncomfortable. I'm gonna have to step outside that comfort zone if I really want these things. And just being okay with like, it's going to be hard sometimes, like this change, it's going to suck a little bit sometimes, like you're going to want to go back, you're going to want to quit, but realizing like if you do want to get to that next level, that's what it takes. And like, it's, again, it's not easy, like it's not easy, but change isn't easy, and getting the things that you want isn't easy. And if it was easy, then everybody would do it, right? So you have to just be willing to be uncomfortable to grow.
Yes, I love that. There's a analogy that I love, which is that in order for a seed to break outside of that outside shell, the amount of pressure that it takes is insane, and it's very easy to stay in that shell and to be buried and just stay comfortable. But the true growth comes from having that pressure build and build and build and build until it gets to a point where it has to break out. It either breaks out or it dies. And that's what growth is all about. It's about breaking outside of those comfort shells that we create. And lots of times they aren't even what serves us. They're what enables us to survive in whatever it is the current status quo is. And you're absolutely right that growth is all about getting outside of your comfort zone and pushing yourself out there. Starting a podcast scared the ever living crap out of me. It was, I don't know about you, but learning how
Yeah,
to
same.
edit, it's hard.
Yeah, yeah.
And I mean, like I cried. The number of nights that I've sat here trying to figure out technology or editing, and just be like, this is not easy. I thought it was just going to be like, yeah, we'll have a conversation, we'll stick it out there, it'll be great.
Hmm.
But I have loved the process. But that's what growth is. Growth is taking the expectation of what you think it's going to be and letting go of that and saying, you know what? I can't control the outcome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my best effort into the growth piece of it. And if I give my best, I have to be comfortable knowing that the outcome is going to be what it is that it needs to be. And lots of times it's not at all what I expected it to be, but usually it's better.
Hmm.
And that's and that's hard sometimes to let go of, but it's what makes life interesting. It's what makes life exciting. Letting go of the expectation of what it's going to be and allowing it to become whatever it is it's supposed to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you touched on it really well, just about just being okay with like figuring it out, like figuring it out on the fly, like enjoying the process. Like it's the cliche saying, like enjoy the process, but like it's cliche for a reason, because
Yeah.
that's the way it's supposed to be. Like as a person I like control, I like to know what things are going to be like. I like routine, I like structure. Like I'm the guy who will sit and think about a decision and overthink. Like that is me to a T. But like as you said, the more you realize like some of the best things that happen in your life happen when you take those leaps, like when you don't really know what the outcome is going to be. Like when I decided that I wanted to leave teaching and work for myself. Like that was a huge leap for me. And I thought
Oh
about
yeah.
it forever. When I wanted to start a podcast, I was like, man, like this is scary. Like, I don't know if I can do this. And now, 60 some episodes in, I'm like, okay, why did I think about this decision for a whole year before I started it? And I think that's where a lot of us get really stuck, and we get in that kind of like that gray zone of like, you overthink, and what if this goes wrong, and what if this goes wrong, and like, what if I fail, and like what if this person laughs at me? And it's like, none of that stuff matters. Like take the first step, and then you figure it out as you go. You take that imperfect action, and then once you kind of get that ball rolling, you get that momentum rolling, then that's when all that growth starts to happen. But so many of us just get in our own heads about those things, and me included, I still do. And it's something that it's a lesson that I'm working on right now as we speak, just trying to just take more action and just be okay with being imperfect and messing up and figuring it out on the fly. Because like you said, that's when the best stuff happens. Like that's when you see your best progress. So just being able to just take that first leap, I think, is so important.
Because you're going to fail. I mean, that's the reality.
Absolutely.
You are going to fail. You're going to stub your toe. You're going to tape entire podcast episodes where there's no audio. You're going to screw up, and then you're going to come back and you're going to fix it and you're going to do better next time. And you're going to learn from the process. And no baby learns to walk by standing up and taking steps and moving. If they stayed in the comfort zone, they'd never learn how to walk. They'd never learn how to talk. It's about falling down. It's about getting knocked over. It's about all of the mud and the guts and the ugliness, but that's where the growth happens. And there's an old quote, I can't remember who said this, but said the only way to fail is to quit. And that is so true. And when you apply that to life, it's so empowering because as long as you've not quit, you're not done. So you can screw up royally, and I have made some major screw ups in life, but it's not until you quit that it's an actual failure. Otherwise, it's just part of the process until you quit, until you say, you know what, this isn't going to happen. And sometimes that's the right step to take. Sometimes you have to say, you know what, I thought this was what I wanted. It wasn't. And that's okay too. But until you've consciously made that choice, you've not failed. It's a hard step to take sometimes. And it's hard to live in that land of being uncomfortable. I used to be hyper vigilant about control. When I had my first job out of college, I was the only woman in a team of 38 men.
Wow.
And we had a blast. We had so much fun together. But one of the things that they love to do, and with 38 of them, they were really good at this. I was famous for the fact that my desk was immaculate. My stapler was in one place, my tape dispenser, my mouse was always here, my phone was always lined up perfectly. Like my desk was immaculate. And what they would do is they would walk by and they would move stuff. And so with 38 of them, my desk constantly moved. And the amount of time early on that I spent moving things back, it drove me nuts. I would get furious. I'd never know who had moved what because with all of them doing it, my entire desk constantly moved. And finally it broke me. I was like, you know what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where my tape dispenser is. It doesn't matter where my stapler is. I'm wasting too much time on this. And so they actually did me a huge favor because what they taught me was that I can focus all my energy on controlling things and keeping them rigidly where they are. Or I can be like, you know what? It doesn't matter. And it's become an approach that I've learned in life is really valuable, which is good enough. Perfect really isn't necessary. And you can waste so much energy trying to attain perfect. Or you can say, you know what, this is good enough.
I love that because of that. I mean, I think that applies to so many different areas of life, just like being okay with just being good enough. Because, like, we have, like you said, perfect doesn't exist. And we think we need to be perfect. And if it's not perfect, everyone's going to notice and it's going to be, everyone's going to laugh at us. And it's not like going to be this immaculate, great thing. And it's like, no, like, you just need to get started. You need to take action. You
Yes.
need to be consistent. You need to, one thing that I always say, just when it comes to, like, I mean, exercise specifically, but just in life in general, is I tell myself, get your reps. Just get your reps. Like they're gonna suck at first. They're not gonna be pretty. Like when I first went in the gym, I looked terrible. Like my form was bad. Like when I first tried, doing podcasts, you go back and listen to the first ones, they're not as good as the ones now. Like when I like first started playing football, like I didn't know how to get in the stance. Everything sucks at first, and then you get your reps, you continue to get your reps, you get that volume in, and things start to figure their way out. But you have to be okay with being bad at first in order to get good. Like you're never going to get good if you're afraid of always just like, okay, people are laughing at me, people are looking at me. It's not how I want it to be. It's not perfect. It's like life isn't perfect. Like you have to learn to be okay with that. And that's when you start to make your best progress.
Yes, I love that. I think we have our title for your episode, which is, get good at moving forward. I'll figure out how it flows, but you've got to be bad in order to get good at something. And that's so true because you have to be okay with sucking. You have to be okay with just not being good at it because that is the only way to get good at it is to get comfortable in the realm of not being good at it and doing it anyway. I don't think we're going to hit another higher point than that. I think that is our perfect place to end because that was such a good one. So Latham, thanks you so much for this. This has been amazing. What is something that you want to leave us with as our final thought? And it can be anything.
So I would say one thing that I talk about a lot, and it's something that I got from a book, James Clear, Atomic Habits, which I'm sure a lot of people have read that one. It's a really popular book. But one thing that he says in there is just focusing on getting 1% better. And it's something that I say every day. I post it all over my social media. It's something that's like it's part of kind of my tagline. Like I have a huge flag in my gym downstairs that has 1% better on it. And it's just something that I focus on a lot because I think again, sometimes we get so overwhelmed with like being perfect, or like we need to have the progress today, or we need to be like so far along. It's like that kind of stuff just prevents people from ever getting started or ever taking the actions that they want to take, and getting to those goals that they want to get to in life, whether it's in their job or whether it's fitness or relationship or whatever. And I think when you can switch that mindset a little bit and just think, okay, what's something that I can do today to just be 1% better, and you break that down and you do that consistently, well, when you look up in 6 months or a year, well, now you're 300% better after a year. If you get
Yeah.
1% better every single day, like, you're a whole different person down the line. So I think when you can really break those things down and just focusing on, even if I'm having a bad day today and things aren't going the way I want, like, there's still some way that I can find to get 1% better, right? So that would kind of be my message, and that's something that I live by. A part of my philosophy is just be 1% better, because that's what really matters. That's how progress is made. That's how all the people that you see that are successful and that have done things and have, accomplished goals that you want to accomplish, that's what they do. They just get a little bit better every single day. So that's what I'd leave people with.
I love that. That is awesome. You are Bass Built Fitness on Instagram. Where else
Yep.
can people go to find out about you?
Yeah, I have bassbuiltfitness.com as a website. I have a newsletter that you can also find in my Instagram bio. And then I also have a podcast called The Fit-ish Project as well. But yeah, my Instagram is kind of where you'll find me the most. And that's where you can find all my other stuff as well.
Rock on. Well, thank you so much. This was amazing. Like this, as I said, I knew that we would just hit the stride and we would get there, and this was amazing. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Caroline's Adventure podcast. While you're here, subscribe to the show so you're the first to catch new episodes when they're released. And if you enjoyed hanging out with me today, please leave a 5-star rating. For links to social media and more content, visit the description for this episode or go to carolinesadventure.com. That's Caroline with 2 A's, adventure.com.